On the beach, a sexy woman struggled to lift a stone and clumsily knocked open a huge conch shell. She thought she could enjoy a delicious meal, but there was only a thin slice of meat inside the thick shell of the conch. After enduring for 2 days, she had to endure the disappointment and tore off a small piece of conch meat to chew in her mouth. The strong and pungent smell unexpectedly made her cough repeatedly, looking quite embarrassed. She quickly spat out the conch meat, opened her hands in frustration, and wondered how long these days would continue. However, not far away, the man was enjoying a sumptuous feast. In front of them were sashimi and lobster meat, along with a bowl of special coconut dipping sauce. Despite being stranded on a deserted island, the quality of the food was worlds apart. The man seemed to be enjoying the delicacies as if on vacation. The woman couldn't suppress her hunger. She gracefully walked past the man, leaving behind a beautiful silhouette, intentionally catching his attention. Sure enough, after she took a few steps, the man called out to her, asking if she wanted to sit down and have something to eat. The woman immediately turned around, appearing calm and composed, but her heart was already filled with joy. She quickly walked to the man's side, unabashedly using her hands to grab the fish and lobster, and took big bites, eating voraciously. The man was worried that she might choke. Hurriedly and thoughtfully handed over a coconut that had just been opened, the woman picked up a coconut bigger than her head, and poured it down, without hesitation that she was a rich wife, showing an unrestrained side, which made the man laugh. If placed 2 days ago, the man couldn't even imagine that he, a poor loser working on a yacht, would be stranded on this deserted island with a young and beautiful wealthy lady. What surprised him even more was that the woman left a sweet kiss after a hearty meal. He was delighted by her affection. Since then, the man no longer despised the woman who couldn't do anything but treated her well. The woman also let go of her guard and began to trust and rely on this poor boy who could catch fish and cook. Despite the remote island. But there is plenty of food in the sea. Use plastic bags and broken fishing nets to secure tree branches, weave palm leaves into roofs and walls, and build a sufficient shelter on the beach to shelter from wind and rain. Gradually, the two people have completely adapted to the life on the desert island. Although the rescue seems out of reach, they support each other, rely on each other, and find more fulfillment and happiness than city life. However, just when they thought happiness would last forever, an accident occurred. One day, the man went fishing in the sea as usual. But when he came ashore, he found a survivor lying next to the reef, covered in blood and barely breathing. The man was shocked and quickly approached to prepare for rescue. But when he saw the survivor's face, he suddenly felt uneasy, and fell into a deep dilemma, because the survivor was not a stranger, but the long-lost wealthy husband of the woman. The man hesitated repeatedly in the conflict. In the end, the rich husband was brought back to the beach, and as soon as the woman saw that her husband was still alive, she immediately rushed forward, hugged each other excitedly, and then took the rich husband back to the hut and rested on a soft blanket. Although the billionaire behaved extremely harshly on the yacht, always treating men as servants, the man now chooses to let bygones be bygones, and even takes the initiative to pour a bowl of precious fresh water for him. The billionaire quickly takes the water and drinks it all in one gulp, not leaving a single drop. Finally, he managed to save his life from the gate of death. After recovering, he immediately hugged his long-lost wife and poured out his deep longing. The intimacy between the couple made the man feel very uncomfortable, and soon, the surviving wealthy husband fell into a deep sleep. The man sat on the beach, feeling jealous, and regretting his decision. But then he realized that having one more person on this deserted island meant having one more hope to survive. He pulled himself together. Decide to go on with business as usual. In order to save himself and the woman, try to survive. He can go out to sea every day to fish, and find food for the three of them, but his kindness did not come to a good end, after the surviving rich husband woke up. With suspicion in my heart, I can't believe that a man and a woman have been living on the island for so long without anything happening. Men understand men the best, especially when he didn't like this person who was so submissive to him before. Now the poor boy, with his mediocre fishing skills, is stealing the limelight in front of his beloved wife, in order to turn the tide and prove himself as the boss. While the men were out fishing at sea, the wealthy man secretly lit the bonfire with the lighter he carried with him. There is an extreme sense of pride in his speech. He even mocks men for not being able to start a fire by drilling wood. He eats raw meat every day, just like a savage. In the face of the challenge from the wealthy, men quickly retaliate. He takes the initiative to help cut the lobster meat. Unwilling to hand over the only knife to the rich man, the atmosphere was instantly filled with the smell of gunpowder. However, this is just the beginning. 2 men and a woman are trapped on a desert island. Whoever has more food, who can have sexy beauties, for this rich man and poor man, began to show off their charm crazily, and started a series of intense competitions. Guess who the beauty will ultimately choose? This morning, while the men were out at sea hunting, the wealthy man secretly divided the double room between the men into 2 single rooms. In order not to tear his face, the man chooses to compromise silently, but he is no longer willing to share the hard-caught food. But the rich are not worried about going hungry at all, because he had just picked up a small knife from the beach, claiming that as long as he had a knife in his hand, he would never starve even if he closed his eyes and went hunting. However, shortly before dusk, the wealthy man was swiftly proven wrong. Although he had the knife, he was left with nothing. But you can't go to the sea without diving goggles, you can only fish on the shore, and you can only tie the fish on the shore, and you can't even get a piece of fish scales, and you can't force the fish, so the rich man has to take the woman into the mangrove forest to catch crabs, and just eat a bite. I almost vomited all the food I had eaten for 30 years, and after only one day, the 2 of them were so hungry that their chests were pressed against their backs, and in desperation, the rich man could only put down his body, and while the man was sleeping, he secretly took away his diving goggles and harpoon. Then quietly dived into the sea to fish, and soon, the rich man successfully inserted a big fish, just when he was complacent, and threw the diving goggles back to the man. In the face of provocation, the man was not a little angry, but showed an intriguing expression. The rich man began to feel something was wrong, so he hurried back to the woman and asked about the situation. Unexpectedly, the woman hesitated and refused to say what had happened just now. The rich man immediately realized that the woman took advantage of his absence. He secretly wore a forgiveness-colored hat. The millionaire collapsed. He couldn't believe it. The man dared to retaliate with this method. He only stole his diving goggles, but he actually stole his own wife. The millionaire could no longer remain calm. Roughly grabbing the woman's hair, he dragged her in front of the man, threw her onto the beach like garbage, then turned around without looking back, and walked towards the other end of the island, determined to part ways with them. However, neither the billionaires nor the men could have imagined that, due to momentary suspicion and anger, they would both ultimately fall into an irreversible predicament. The man shattered the glass bottle and smoothed out the bottom of the bottle on a stone. Then, he heated the plastic bottle with fire. Glue the polished bottom of the bottle to the mouth of the bottle, and then cut the bottle, seal the mouth of the bottle with rubber, carefully wrap the edge that was cut, and soon, a homemade diving goggle was made, and the man couldn't wait to dive into the water. Holding the bottle and observing it all around, the results surprised him greatly. Everything underwater was clear and visible, with no less effect than a professional diving mask. He couldn't help but laugh because being able to see things clearly in the water also meant seeing hope for survival. After finishing the production of the diving goggles, the man immediately picked up the harpoon, dived into the sea, and prepared to catch a big fish to reward himself for his exhausted body. However, when he swam to the seabed, he discovered a silent small boat. After seeing the boat, the man immediately gave up the idea of catching fish, and exerted all his strength to flip the boat over. But in the next moment, he fell into despair. There was a huge hole at the bottom of the boat that could not be repaired. But the man seemed to have a plan. He picked up the harpoon, threw it onto the boat, then took off his diving mask. Next, he lifted the rope and, risking drowning, dragged the small boat forward underwater. The small boat was too heavy, and the depth of 7 or 8 meters underwater added to the difficulty. Despite the man's best efforts, he quickly reached his limit and had to give up the small boat, quickly resurfacing, gasping for breath. However, the man did not give up. He took a deep breath and dived into the sea again, dragging the small boat to continue moving forward. After several hours of struggle, the man finally succeeded in dragging the small boat onto the beach. Seeing this scene, the companions hurried over, wanting to help, and although the man was already exhausted, he angrily refused them, not letting them get near the boat, and he pointed to the young man who wanted to help, and looked at his wife. Unbelieving that this couple truly wanted to help, he cursed his wife and the poor boy away, and dragged the small boat to the other side of the beach. He repaired the damages with the materials he gathered, but strangely, the damages to the small boat couldn't be completely fixed. He had long been hungry and dizzy, but he persisted in working very seriously. The next day, the man used a plastic board he found to cover the hole and made a sail that could shrink freely. Surprisingly, he actually successfully repaired the boat. As long as it is not extreme weather, it is completely enough to navigate at sea. After seeing this scene, the young man started to panic. Before being stranded on a deserted island, he was just a steward on a yacht. If he really helps the wealthy man find rescue, surely will come back to take revenge on his wife's behalf. With this thought, the young man quickly returned to the cottage, woke up the woman, and when the rich man went fishing at sea, they decisively rushed to the small boat, preparing to take the lead. Leave the mean rich man on the desert island forever, and soon, the two of them worked together to push the boat to the seaside, although the rich man found out in time, but because the distance was too far, by the time he caught up, the guy and the woman had successfully boarded the boat. Sailing towards the boundless sea, but strangely, the hope of escaping slipped away right before my eyes. I will forever be trapped on a deserted island. The billionaire's face showed not despair, but rather a bewildering smile as he lay on the recliner. While watching the boat go away, he leisurely drank coconut juice. Such an unusual behavior puzzled the young man and the woman, thinking that he had gone crazy, but it didn't take long. The woman was horrified to find that the small boat was actually leaking. She quickly picked up things to try to plug the hole, but no matter how she tried, the seawater still poured into the cabin. It was then that the two of them realized that the millionaire had never fixed the small boat. A series of operations were all staged for them to see. Now, they could only watch as the small boat sank back into the depths of the sea. In order to save their lives, they jumped into the turbulent sea and desperately swam towards the shore. At this moment, the wealthy person was lighting a fire. Burned down the hut they had worked so hard to build, and ate the grilled fish leisurely, without worrying that the two would drown in the sea, and a few hours later, with tenacious perseverance and a strong desire to survive, the two successfully swam back to the island. Without saying a word, he picked up the spear and walked towards him. Although Xiaohua was young and strong, the hours of running had already made him exhausted. At this moment, he was no match for the rich man. He quickly turned and ran away. The next second, the rich man threw the spear, hitting Xiaohua right in the back. The pain was so painful that Xiaohua dug up the messy corners, and fell heavily into the sea. The rich man followed, holding the spear hard, stabbing it hard, and the blood instantly stained the sea red, and Xiaohua received a boxed lunch on the spot. Then the rich man tied the woman to the pillar, and taught him a hard lesson. The woman knew in her heart that she must rely on him to survive on the desert island in the future. Her eyes were full of pleading and guilt, and it didn't take long for the rich man to forgive the woman's betrayal. The two of them built a cottage again on the beach and started a peaceful life of farming and weaving, until half a year later, a fishing boat suddenly appeared, breaking the tranquility of the deserted island. The woman never dreamed that someone would actually find this place. She excitedly sat up, her excited heart showing in her eyes. She quickly got up and asked the fisherman's family to take her away. After getting on the fishing boat, she eagerly ate the bread, making the fisherman's family feel particularly distressed. After eating and drinking, the fishermen were afraid that the woman would catch a cold, so they sent a blanket intimately, and at this moment, the rich man who went to the sea to fish helped him to the water, and just saw the fishing boat passing in front of her. She laughed excitedly. Thinking that he had finally made it through, he could go back and continue to enjoy wealth and prosperity. He then raised his hands high, signaling the women to wait for him. However, the women immediately turned their heads to look at the fisherman, confirming that they had not noticed the wealthy man. Then took out the lighter that the rich man relied on to survive from his arms, and the rich man found out that he had been taken away by her, undoubtedly to cut off her last hope of survival. She saw the fishing boat getting farther and farther away, and completely collapsed, looking at her struggling and angry appearance. The woman shook her head mockingly, and then smiled triumphantly.